Welcome to the Research for Social Change Lab podcast. For our first series, we will be presenting panel talks and conversations from our symposium on housing and homelessness in Peterborough. The symposium wraps with a discussion summarizing the insights of the panels and group meetings that took place over the 2 days of the proceedings. In a discussion with those in attendance, each group presents some of their key insights and how these findings can be implemented through the various community organizations involved. Some of the key topics discussed are decriminalizing approaches to homelessness, Indigenous homelessness, building relationships with those with lived experiences, realizing the right to housing, and increasing housing stock. You'll hear how and who will be working on implementing their calls to action and which sources of power will be called on to assist in them doing so.
Congratulations for making it through an intense 2 days. This was a lot in every way. People keep asking me how I feel, and I have decided that I feel really elevated right now, but I'm probably going to wake up in the middle of the night and feel really anxious because it is urgent, and because I don't want to have overpromised that we can do this, but I do still think we can. I do still think we can articulate actions that matter for our community and hold one another accountable for realizing them. Knowing that some of these actions are ones that we are going to do, tomorrow, and some are ones that are long game actions and will take dedicated, slow work forever, because it's about protecting each other. Okay, so the way this is going to go is that you all participated in dynamic and amazing working group conversations over the last 2 days. And in those groups, you had fearless moderator, facilitator type people who took all those ideas and are going to share them back to the group today. And as each group shares, what I would ask, one thing I know in my groups, we never got to the who has the power to take this on? Who has what organization in our community is well positioned to actualize this action? So I'd like us to pause after each group presents and actually think that piece through a little bit. And if we can identify a group or a institution or an organization that should be taking this piece on, let's get that on record, and then that can be part of the work of the lab going forward. I commit to doing that, to following up with those people, whether it is a media, a press release, we identified that we can't get any further without the help of our provincial member of parliament. So we call on you, Dave Smith, to come to the table. If that's what it looks like, we sort of need to, I'll try that. So that's the process. I don't know if it's going to work, but my hope is that this allows us to do something different than just writing another report and putting it on a shelf. So let's see how it goes. Thanks. The groups were asked to take 5 minutes and convey these things. If you didn't do it this way, it doesn't matter. So don't feel too hemmed in by this. It was just an enabling structure to get the conversation moving towards something tangible. Our groups often didn't do short, midterm, and long-term actions. We did micro, meso, macro actions. So what can we do as individuals? What can we do as organizations? And what do we need to do as a society? So you can share back your ideas that way. Really, anything goes. Let's try. So this is the list. So we're going to start with decriminalizing approaches to housing stabilization. And there were 2 groups who did that. So let's actually listen to both groups and then talk about potential people, organizations, institutions that we might want to call in to take up this work. And I might just write those things down so I remember on this big piece of paper.
Lily's going to have to go because we're currently working on locating the paperwork for yesterday.
Oh, okay. No worries.
We did have similar conversations in our groups, though, because we talked about what...
I think I gave it to Marianne, and it's on your desk in the lab. Maybe.
It's on the desk in the lab.
Yeah, maybe.
Hang on.
I got a stack of them yesterday.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can go first. And Chelsea and I were talking, and our groups did have some like overlapping things, which is really great. So the first was something that came up quite a bit, and it was this sort of silos, loneliness, kind of people kept saying like, why didn't I know about these things? Like, why didn't I know that they did this? Why didn't I know about this service? And so one thing that my group really wanted to see changed is something to do with this like cross-sector collaboration, this really knowing what people are doing. And actually this came up in the group I was working with today as well, so that's great to see as well. But really just thinking not only like for collaborating with services and things like that, but also like for the people that are delivering them, like not feeling so lonely in this like fight. So that was the first one, and I know that your group is similar. The second is a little bit more, I would say macro in the sense that it's kind of less tangible, I guess, but it looks more tangible on the ground, and it's thinking about how do we treat people, and like how do you treat people that need security, stability. There's a lot of talk of this like us versus them, as far as we, the people in this room, have I think a lot of like similar values when it comes to these discussions. But there's many people out there that feel quite differently, and it's also often kind of like going head to head in these discussions, and thinking about how are we having these discussions, and how are we being like empathetic. I think it comes down to. So we talked about. I know Wealth had this really successful YIMBY program through their drug strategy that actually has some like, great tangible results. And talking to political leaders in our community, and I think it was said earlier in the panel, like not being so combative about it, but actually just having like a real like human conversation. And then finally, this was kind of like a broader discussion, but I think it comes down to like harm reduction, but both in like the word harm reduction that we know, and also just reducing the harms to people. Like, how are we making sure people are okay? How are we making sure people aren't dying? So thinking about reducing barriers to services, and reducing barriers to like losing services. So this includes being like culturally appropriate and inclusive to our Indigenous community members, and also de-escalation, destigmatization, and shelter. So I think that this is a pretty like tangible piece that we could collaborate with agencies who are like providing these frontline services. So that was kind of our discussion. It was a really great chat, and I think that we came up with some, again, like these sort of like higher level things about how we treat people, and also these really like tangible things. And I think your paper just made it in time.
It did.
Perfect.
Thank you. So I won't double up on anything you've said because we had a lot of similar things in our group. So we didn't work through like the goals in that way. We kind of have like a list of things that are great. So one was bringing back the coordinated outreach table, which I think I heard in this group, in the facilitation I was just doing, that is still happening, but people are not coming. Where's Autumn?
Yeah. That's real.
So it's still happening, but agencies aren't showing up.
Yeah, reach out if you want to get involved. Yeah.
So if you have outreach staff in your agency that are doing frontline outreach with the community, connect with either Auden, Elena, or someone at One City, and they will get you in that direction. Because it's important for all of those people to come together, because part of that was agencies are coming that don't have certain resources and are saying, I have a client who needs a tent. Who has a tent? Who has a sleeping bag? Who can fill out a form? Who can do this? Who can do that? And that's this holistic approach to supporting the community, because agencies are trying to do everything and can't. And that came up in the discussion today about like staying in their lane kind of things, because agencies do certain things amazingly, but we're trying to do all of this extra shit on the side of our desk that should be left to someone who can do that appropriately, but like who, you know? So
it's also like it's that, and it's reducing duplication, right?
Exactly.
Because we're a lot of times doing the same really well resourced because it was like the focus of the attention for so long. And so if we're all doing the same work, who are we missing?
So expanding that model for other services, so like housing searches, because there's tons of agencies and people that do housing searches. So how do we like amalgamate that so we're not, you know, all looking at the same housing because like they're going to 3 different places, but the units that are available are the same units. Like I don't have any different information for you than CCRC does than someone else does, right? So they're not gaining anything really by going to the different places, but searching for the same units. So what should each agency kind of focus on, and like how can you be the standout so that we know, I think we talked about this, tell me if I'm wrong, so that other agencies know where to send people. So like if I have someone that needs to search for housing, well I have 20 options that I can send them to. Which agency is the best fit for them? That's going to be able to support them through that. A community hub model set up twice a week. This came up in the group we were just in also. So having, which is kind of existing at Trinity already, but having like ODSP, OHIP healthcare. I don't know if anyone remembers the START program that used to be in Peterborough. It was for women. So it had like EFRI, YWCA, like there would once a week, I think, be like a community. Yeah, so that people could come in and get all of those services in one spot and not have to like go to KSAC, then get sent to YWCA, then oh you actually have to go to EFRI to do this, oh now you have to go here. So it was all in one spot. Build on the physician group that's being brought to Peterborough. More mobile service delivery, so that kind of goes to what Auden said, like there's people that we're missing. Capitalizing on Trinity. And a continuum of service delivery, which also fed into a continuum of housing, because there's gaps in our housing services right now. So it's like there's like low income housing, and then there's like high income housing essentially, because there really is nothing in the middle. But like there's no process for moving people into that, and like people are paying $300 a month for a unit, and then they're like, oh, your income's past that now, awesome, go find one for $1,800. And have that same level of wellness and same ability to continue everything you're doing, and it just doesn't happen. So there isn't this like leveled system where people can move through and still maintain everything that they've built, because as soon as you're spending all of your money on housing, like how do you keep your self-care or your car or your transport, like whatever it is, right? Addressing vacancy and the rent control, and you might have to read that one, right?
Building affordability provisions at the building permit and planning permission stage. So one of the things we talked about was like parking requirements and design guidelines that add to the cost of housing, or limit the ability to be more like adaptive and responsive in creating housing stock. Yeah.
Because there was an agency, I think it was that somewhere had to pay like $5,000 to put in an extra parking spot before they could rent it out to people, and like not everybody has that, so they'll just be like, ask for it, like, and then you can't have anybody in that apartment. There's so many like regulations and rules that are silly. There's another one about like flowers, like they had to plant flowers in front before they could move people in, like it's just ridiculous. Finding out who owns what houses and having a landlord registry. That would put some pressure and accountability on like the conglomerates that do own hundreds of houses, and
that was really
bus stupid planning requirements, parking requirements, design guidelines, and then there was something about flooding the municipal building. But that was part of.
I think that was flooding municipal council meetings, but I wrote it as the municipal building.
And I was telling everybody all day that we're. But a lot of it was like. Community and collective advocacy, because a lot of like we're all doing our own advocacy in different areas, but there was an example is, I don't know if Jess Benner's still here, but the PDS, when PDS had to come together really quick and everybody went to council and presented with the same message and we're all saying the same thing, and you can't ignore that when there's 10 agencies out there saying this is what's going on, stop ignoring it and do something about it. And that happened with the overnight shelter too. We did a big protest out front and it ended up getting voted in, which was great. No idea if the protest helped with that, but like just sharing that same message. So instead of us all fighting in, we just brought up a ton of silos, we're fighting the same battle, and we all have different expertise and different opinions and different, resources that we can use. So why can't we put that together and then push it forward. Because we're so much stronger as a collective than we are as just one agency or one single person. And I think that's it. I don't know if there's anything else.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Anyone from the group want to add anything? We had a really
That was
big
such a good big list. I don't think we can even remember
That was so
where it
amazing.
started.
And Charles, the city strategy that got approved, the emergency response is what you're seeing, but the long-term response that got approved was a hub system, exactly like you
Nice.
said. So that's been approved.
Okay,
Awesome.
can I put a check mark?
Who's responsible?
Yes.
Albert.
Albert says the city's moving on the hub.
He just doesn't want us to flood the building.
Is there, it's like the building now.
Did you say I want you to?
Are there any other
Not
people?
make insurance more difficult. Like.
Are there any folks in the room who feel like they heard anything that they are called to take on? A lot of it seems like stuff we just need to do, right? Like, go to the outreach table, maybe coordinate a housing support search. Like, who's doing that? Like, get all those people in the room and sort of figure out who's doing what and what pieces are missing. Anything else?
We've been talking about coordinating an advocacy committee that brings people from different organizations together in an intentional way, so I think that's something we would be excited to do.
I feel like we just gotta meet through the back channels very simply and regularly.
Nice.
All of those issues are like so important, but they're also so consistently in front of all of us, and like we need a working group to tackle them. There's the CPPS system, which you guys are talking about with all the planning stuff, from the Planning Act changes by the Ford government. Like the flip side of that is that they're developing those right now from upfront consultation, right? So there's the potential to have some of the groups here to be part of that upfront consultation. To form away from you need a parking spot in the planter in this dogmatic approach, right? You know? So that's cool.
Okay, so one city is volunteering to take on pulling together an advocacy table, and I actually think we just are also organizing roles for the board at one city, and mine is the advocacy table, so great. I'm in. And what I'm hearing from Alex too is we need other types of tables in relation to other pieces of this work, like in the planning process. Is there a piece of that you feel like you're well positioned to like maybe just do the invite, or maybe it's someone else at the city that we would ask?
There are like newsletters at the city on the city website that you can sign up for, so that you get notification of when these public meetings are happening, and that's a good mechanism at least to get informed of like when those public consults are happening on the planning requirements. I don't know.
I'm just sort of saying that how it happens is we scramble decision by decision. Like I might be scrambling to talk to Christian in Auden and Atlanta, and then I might be scrambling to talk to Will about the official plan changes, and I might be scrambling to talk to them here. So to have like a coalition or a working group that just meets regularly, to have like experts from all these different areas, to just be like, hey, let's get a coffee, and this is like, help me out, Alicia.
Yeah, so United Way is currently developing a consultation process to hopefully establish some kind of income security advocacy table, which sounds maybe tied to what you guys are talking about. So if you're interested in that, I have cards, come get at me and I will give you one of those cards so we can get in touch.
And we can put in the report the link to the meetings.
The thing my group talked about, we were addressing Indigenous homelessness, but it ties into exactly what's being talked about now. It was more about like having a list of resources, having like an associated panel for those resources, and then scaling it up from like the city, like the Peterborough resources, and kind of identifying the gaps that exist and how to fill them, and then scaling it up to like Durham region, or like the GTA, to eventually the whole province, with whatever lens needs to be like an Indigenous lens or an LGBTQ lens or whatever other lens there is.
Can I hire you as part of your normal job to do that, to come up with that list? Done.
When you're doing your research, like around all the partnerships, organizations, etc., I think there are a lot of community tables, steering committees. Like, was there an evaluation of the purpose and usefulness of those tables. Because I think that some of it exists, but I think one, not everyone's invited to the table. And whether you choose to show up, that's one thing, but whether you're invited is another thing, and I don't think that is the case for all of the tables. Like the CAB is a prime example. I've never seen such good membership and good dedication to the CAB that all these other tables may not have. And I think what Alex is saying around, there is structure in the community and dedication at some of these tables, but are they doing what they're supposed to?
Right.
So I think that's,
so maybe
be
something
evaluated.
else, as well as the list of resources, is we need to do a bit of a scan of the list of the tables. Which ones are active? What are their roles? Do we have duplicate tables? Or sometimes is that okay? Because we were really looking at the provision of sheltering and homelessness services. And people talk to us about tables and the loss of tables post-COVID, actually.
Yes.
And that they were mourning and feeling about, but not about their efficacy. So we could start by just figuring out like what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the consultation that I'm trying to develop. Like, it's still very early, but that's part of the idea.
Okay.
Of getting a scan of
And we're gonna work with the United Way.
Yeah.
This is all being caught on the record.
Yeah.
What is CAB an acronym for those who don't know?
Oh, the Community Advisory Board. And it is the group of folks who come together to help administer the Reaching Home funds, basically. So people apply for that funding, and then we all recuse ourselves because we're all implicated in all of the funding choices. But then we come together and like decide who gets what. And it's basically like half the people here.
I also was wondering that can I add something that while you're taking notes that came up from our last lived experience group, is that there was a request for a visual representation of what's going on. So that might include advisories, lived experience engagement, but resources, and like that's something living maybe, that it isn't just like this is what exists in this moment, but something that people could access in a way that was visual, was accessible, and also illuminated what exists, and then who is being left out of those.
Yeah.
Perhaps an artist.
We have an artist in here.
An artist might make something.
Stop giving him tasks.
Yeah, we can brainstorm this. We have a lot of artists.
It falls into that idea of like criminalizing people that are like living precariously, because how it's happening right now is that the police are being called for anything that's uncomfortable,
Right.
because no one knows who to call.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the DDIA did like a tiny business card that you would need a magnifying glass to read to hand to downtown businesses, but it was like so out of date. It had like the old peer support group, so that would be a huge resource in terms of like trying to not to divert people from the cops. Like it would help so much.
So one thing, when we did the coordinated access guide, that was like 2022 or something, and it's now totally wrong.
Yeah.
So it's just a really tricky thing to get anything, because of everything you've all said around like every day our funding changes, every day we lose a program, every day. So I think we'll need more hands than, it might have to be more than Tamara figuring this out, because to figure out how to create a living document that's more of like a wiki or something where people can update it, will just take more.
We would have the capacity to do like a 211, like a local one. Would some agency that's here have the capacity to have the live stream of what's available for people, and to have some sort of hotline to access it? Is that something that an agency could do?
That's Alyssa signing up.
Social services aren't here anymore, but that does sound like something social services should do for the city of Peterborough.
That's what I was gonna say too, is like I think it should be a city position, and somebody like, if possible, I don't know, but like, because then you have that monitoring also, like there's a position dedicated to that, because as agencies, like, we will never update it. Like, you need somebody to call us and be like, hey, what's going on? Because like, there's just so many things to like update, keep track of, go on to, that it just like wouldn't happen. So yeah, I wondered about that.
This is also making me think that there used to be, the city would put together the monthly updates around how many folks in our community are actively homeless and what that flow looks like, and I know we've lost some positions there, but I think that was a good way to help us like know what's happening in a live way. So I'd love for that to also be one of the things we are
up to date about.
Okay, we've lost our flow a little bit around. Tamer, did you? Because I would say let's just go to addressing Indigenous homelessness now, because you've got us started.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I'm gonna be honest with everybody, and I got some beef to deal with. They're like, let's talk about like the different things that came up. And the biggest one for the group that we talked to, was education and white people being afraid of talking about race. So it doesn't get talked about, so the data isn't collected, and people don't know why the data is being collected. And it basically turned into people asking for education from people who already do that a lot, and it's really draining, but it needs to be done. And then again, the advisory council or lived experience committee, and how to be better allies. I feel like it's a good thing, don't get me wrong. It's just the way it was brought up and talked about was, I was like, how many Indigenous people are in this room? How many people Indigenous? 3, 4, baby? 5. So 5 Indigenous people, and how many white people? And then have the 5 Indigenous people in this room have to talk for everybody, and to have that. Wow, I didn't mean to turn this into a lecture.
It needs to be.
It does. It needs to be highlighted.
5 people who are in the capacity and have the privilege to be in these spaces is also doing the extra work of teaching everybody. And I'm sorry, but actually I'm not sorry. It's like your duty to actually do the work yourself. Like Google exists, books exist. We can't do it all for you. Yeah, so that was the big thing that came up, and I didn't have time to address it in the group. And it was all about safe spaces and just how to be better people.
I think that's amazing, because we now know who's responsible. The white people in the room, do your work, do our work, do
And we
better.
can be there to guide you, but we can't do all of it for you.
Or hire us to teach
Yes.
you how to say Anishinaabemowin or Negotiawan or just to make sure the land acknowledgement is right. I want to participate.
Acknowledgement, if you ask me.
Well, if there is going to be one, I would love to be an Indigenous person who participates in it. It's not a burden to me. It's more of a burden to sit and hear it not be right or not exactly right. It's like if it's all happening on this land.
I'd rather see actions made versus just words.
The beautiful thing with the land acknowledgement, if done right, you have a relationship with the land.
Yeah.
Which means you have a relationship with the people of the land. So don't do a land acknowledgement unless you actually mean it. It can't be a box you just check. Miigwech.
And the other reason I don't have a whole lot more to say is everything is interconnected. Us talking here is connected to the person outside. Walking is connected to these lights. It's all connected, and if we have Indigenous representation on everything, it's yeah.
There's
way
also
more
just
open.
speaking to the white people in the room, there's already a lot of resources out there that we just might not either be aware of or have bothered with. But there's the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report that has calls for justice.
Yep.
And there's the Truth and Reconciliation report. Read those recommendations.
They're bullet point.
Exactly. It's very readable. They're long documents, but they're set up in a really readable way. And just take the time. And when I do land acknowledgements, I try and integrate those things into them and make people aware that these are the recommendations. So take the time.
It's an organization could focus on one each day or each week of your work day or work week and reflect on it.
And it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's not easy, but it's important.
You need to be uncomfortable.
Okay, I'm done now.
I'd like 2 comments. One, Google exists. Stop asking people to do emotional labor for you when you can literally look it up. There's tons of elders and people on YouTube that will do teachings, and that's what it's there for. The second one is, I wonder if thinking of accountability in that way, people who are in this room, can we take it back to our agencies and ask for training? Like hire people
Yes.
and bring them in and train us.
Yes.
So I wonder, like, accountability wise, like the people in this room, can we bring it back to our agencies and say, what the heck? Like, why are we doing this? And can we?
It's recorded. I'm gonna bring it to our board.
I keep forgetting it's recorded. I'm swearing. Sorry for people listening back to that.
Yeah. No, I share information. I can speak to my group and what we discussed. So similarly, there's a lot of pieces on education involving Indigenous people with lived and living experience. It kind of got very abstract. We went into micro changes to meso changes and macro changes. And then I also went home and spent some time actually filling out the chart because I'm a student and then doing homework. But there's something I really, and to kind of build on what Tamer's saying, is to increasing accountability, and I wrote them as the money and power holders. Crystal refers to them as the plastics. And to combat and prioritize them, specifically thinking of corporations who have large amounts of housing. And there's, I stated the last symposium, it is absolutely spit in the face of truth and reconciliation that being Indigenous is not a high priority for housing. It's sickening to me. And I would really like for non-Indigenous people to stand up, take some time, and see their role in the daily actions towards truth and reconciliation, specifically in a housing space. And I have lots of things written down, but like kind of Tamer's kind of hit it all on the head for me. But really, those people, and I think it's something I'd be happy to take on in my. I'm trying not to take on more stuff, but it seems like it's in something that needs to be done by a non-Indigenous person, and really taking ownership of that. I call people to self-educate. There's lots of amazing books written by Indigenous people about their experience. Purchase them so that they get money.
But not through Amazon.
Not. To build relationships between. I feel sad that I've been listening to Forecast and other larger organizations talk about how they've built relationships with landlords, and when I've tried to do that from my organization, landlords don't answer me. Yeah, like I tried to start a landlord liaison program at my organization, and it was full stop, no one wanted to work with me. And also I've stated that my organization, Niche Gwenda, then we go to I think the Friendship Center gets involved in a little bit more stuff than we do, but I'm not called by Forecast to come and work with Indigenous people.
Yeah, I was gonna also going. Somebody else lived experience and growing up here. It definitely. There's a lot less organizations for us and people that work for us. Not that they don't work for us, and they're not intertwined with other. It's just those two. And our housing, I've been on the housing list for over 10 years. Yeah. So, our housing is just as scarce.
So with being more of a recognized thing with organizations in the community to call and consult with Indigenous people and Indigenous organizations.
Is Forecast in the room?
Yeah.
Am I going to shit talk?
No, not shit talk. I was just going to say, maybe about 10 years ago, Niche Gwenda and Forecast partnered and developed training together called the Manaoki Project, and it was bridging the gap between Western and Indigenous healing methods. What the heck has come from that?
Nothing.
So that later.
Yes, and we only know, like, historically, like, I haven't been with Forecast for 10 years, so I wouldn't even known that partnership, so
Right.
to rebuild that, I think, is so pivotal. So we're obviously not, resistant to any of that,
Right.
but, sometimes it just takes reaching out and getting to collaborate, and you're an amazing resource, yeah.
Fantastic.
Is that an action point?
Yeah,
Because like KSAC and Miss Canada are like hand in hand. You go there, you get both. And that's it. That's the only. And then if you want to go to the Friendship Center, like the transportation to get there, to even use their services, a lot of people don't do. So yeah.
Might the action coming out of this be that Forecast will find the resources? Like you'll go back through your files and find it, and then you'll reach out to.
Because there's a workbook.
Okay. That was,
Yeah.
she's filling here for this. So looking for her.
Call me. My flyers are all over town.
I have a card for you.
I don't, but
That's okay, you can call me.
thank you.
Email me.
Perfect.
Thank you. We'll lose
Amazing.
the phones. Yeah, that's really for Indigenous, we identified that there needs to be large systemic change. I'd also like to see funders called upon. Yeah. MCCSS, where are you at?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was something in our group specifically about the like short-term funding
Yeah.
for Indigenous organizations that is really undermining the capacity to build long-term nurturing relationships that are necessary, essential to the work.
I just have a question. For my 2 days of participating, I haven't really heard, and it's just coming to light now as we're recapping, haven't really heard much about a conversation about self-sustainable funding in relation to social enterprise or social purpose ventures within our not-for-profit sector. I know that was a really big thing when COIN was around, and it was a buzzword, and then, I do know of other organizations in other communities where it's really been impactful to empower the service users as well as, their funding pool, their money pool for things.
Yeah. You guys do similar.
We do, and we have not been able to figure out the magic where they are not losing money. So to us, the work opportunities are important because they're offering meaningful work for people, but they definitely don't cover costs.
Yeah.
So maybe we need some creative guidance around
Have you
that.
connected with Councillor Luchika? Because that's something that she's brought up and talked about, so she may be able to have some connections, and she's not here today, but that's definitely one thing she was social enterprise.
It's all around money. We need more money. We have lots of love, lots of power, lots of strong voices that are doing good work. So if we need money and we're not going to get it, then we have to find creative ways to make our own money. And it provides skills development and training for the service users.
We should invest in housing and make tons of money. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, it's just something that's
profit. Yeah, profit. So I just did a time check, which I kind of wish I didn't do because it's 3:14, and we are only on. We've done 2. So this isn't the only way we do this. Tell me what to do. Do you want to choose one more to do here as a group? Do we want to? There's babies here. I don't want to suggest staying longer because people need to nap. We're all exhausted. Thinking about it. No longer.
I can share in 10 seconds.
Yes, Jane.
Okay, in our group we talked about the need to build relationships and companionship and mentorship for people with lived experience. We need to build strong relationships of trust, that lived experience is not a monolith, and that there needs to be more representation of diverse people with lived experience, including Indigenous representation everywhere. We talked about the need to pay people living wages, perhaps, ideally, and sustainable engagement with lived experience. No gift cards, but positions, and valuing lived knowledge, And I think that we spoke about how we need to create safe enough places where people can trust to share their lived experiences, but that expertise in the form of lived experience gives us more than just inclusion. It gives us a better idea of what's going on. So there needs to be strong relationships, ongoing relationships, building lived experience leadership, paying folks, and educations, both for people who don't have lived experience, but for people to mobilize and feel comfortable mobilizing their lived experience. That was more than 10 seconds.
The other lived experience moderator, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about many similar things. We kind of broke down some principles of the work, including compensation, not gift cards, follow through and no tokenism, lowering barriers, diverse representation, so a lot of overlap there, including living experience, not just lived experience, which is a hard thing, but something that we should think about. But our actions were better support for staff with lived experience, so people that are already in these roles, better support, and that's something that we're thinking about how we can help with that. And then another piece that I was thinking about, again, like stuff that we can do directly, would be a toolkit for people working with people with lived experience.
It might exist already.
It does, okay, great,
Alex
cool.
Yeah.
Perfect, that's amazing.
Check mark. I will commit to sending it to you to share with everyone.
That's
Yes.
amazing, thank you.
A toolkit and
put some time into that, but now I don't have to.
Maybe a training to come.
But yeah, support. We were like, I've been talking with some people about like a potential support group for people who are, working in the nonprofit sector and might need some, actual support and not just expected to thrive in their employment without any. So, yeah, thanks.
And it sounded like, Alicia, you were sort of naming the United Way as having a stake
Yeah,
in
we're
this.
thinking about it. I've been pitching it to Betsy, and Betsy seems into it. So run it up in
front of the audience.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay, let's keep it this speed, and I'm sorry that this is like, where we're at. Just if there's a couple more people want to like realizing the right to housing or increasing housing stock, 1 or 2 actions, and let's try to get people to continue to name their accountability to realizing them. Big piece of paper.
Oh wait, everyone's looking at me. I'll look away. I know, that was so subtle. All right, so I was in the Realizing the Right to Housing group, and we had a lot of moderators and a lot of folks, and it was really awesome, great conversation. We followed the micro, meso, macro model, and I think a lot of the micro pieces have been talked about because they're really important, just about community care and mobilization, specifically showing up for political events and participation in your community, showing that community care, creating potentially a listserv or some sort of thing in addition to maybe something that lives at social services, something that is held within community, like something where these ideas or possibilities or opportunities are communicated to people so they have access to them. And potentially hosting even like lunch and learns so people can have access to up-to-date information about pieces related to right to housing and other human rights, and in general making that systemic change happen. At the meso level, we talked about removing barriers and potentially empowering players in the housing ecosystem to identify and remove barriers. And see, are there groups being missed? And that includes, referrals that are done with support and love and care to smooth out the joints that link systems or smooths out the gaps that currently exist between systems. And all in the spirit of calling in and opening up spaces for this conversation to happen because we are in this together. I say this as someone who doesn't live in Peterborough and is not from Peterborough, so the we that I'm here in this room right now, but the we excluding me. And as far as the macro, we talked a lot about legal pieces, which when you're talking about the right to housing, we have a legal tool with legal teeth, and we can start to apply some of those things to enact the change
through the mechanisms, but also outside the state. A question linking all of our pieces was, is this to support people or is this to legitimize the state? And if we can ask that question of our actions, I think we can have a lot of collective power. And in general, we talked about access to justice in general. How do we access justice in the legal system, but also in all of our systems? And then a lot of conversations about land, and specifically thinking about Indigenous sovereignty and right to land and UNDRIP and MMIWG and all of the things that already exist. And thank you so much for sharing. And I think there's a lot of collective accountability as white settlers, but also people in community together.
Last group is housing stock. Anybody feel called to share just one or two things, and then we're going to have
I can. We talked a lot about more dense housing and smaller housing, smaller houses. Garden suite rents, making them more accessible. Building above existing buildings. Doing an inventory of what buildings are vacant and how they can be used as well. We also looked at stricter legislation on foreign investors, incentives for denser housing, and the vacancy tax for people who are leaving buildings open that can be used for housing. There needs to be more supports for people to keep people housed. Let's see what else. And I think that was it. But part of our discussion also talked about folks with developmental disabilities, and it's not particularly around stock, but just really bringing that discussion, bringing that representation into these spaces, and ensuring that that assessments are being done so people can be identified and get the supports that they need. And if anybody wants to add, remember.
Alex wants to add.
Well, I know Andy brought it up. There is a commercial vacancy tax now that really shifted things here in the downtown for people that were taking advantage of their spaces as tax write-offs and forced development, which is good. I read something last night. Maybe the algorithm picked it up from our day. It said that BC has implemented like a house flipping tax, where they really penalize people if they flip their house. Like if they buy a house and sell it within the first 2 years. And that is the type of juice I think that we need. That could really help the sort of people on the spectrum of this thing that we're talking about. You know, like make it so my friends can maybe have a house, like stop the speculation. I think that was really cool. But I think that would have to be done at the provincial level. Thank you.
Well, it could be something we bring to the legal clinic or legal students, paralegals even, to just figure out who is responsible, because maybe some of these are municipal taxes around house flipping. I don't know.
This was provincial in BC.
Okay.
I can talk after.
Okay.
But it would be awesome, because what's happening here is there's a consolidation of commercial landlords, and there's a consolidation of real estate people just buying houses to make money.
Yes. Yeah.
And this would stop that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, is there anyone? Do we have any lawyers here?
I wish I could talk right now why we need a lawyer.
Because I think it would be great to work with legal, like I work a lot with Justice for Children and Youth and some of my other work, but maybe to think about like what it looks like to bring forward a legal proposition to the state around de-incentivizing the financialization of housing, because the state incentivized it and got us into this mess. And so does anyone want to become a lawyer? For now, let's all take on that we're going to work through our networks on this. Alex, I'll come back to you on it and see whether we can. Maybe Justice for Children and Youth would be, they're provincial.
The Legal Center does do housing and stuff. Like they do go into that realm of offering support. I don't know where they're at, but
getting in touch with them
Is
a joke. We were across the hall from them and we couldn't even get in touch with them.
You should. When I went up there to ask for help, they like peeked out the little door, and I was like,
You can't. They don't let
Hi.
clients in at all. They talk to you through the slit in the door. You can't go in there
No,
as
they
a
came
client.
out. They
Since
came out to talk
COVID,
here.
they've never let clients
They don't
in.
have walk-ins anymore.
No, you can't go in as a client. You ring a doorbell and then you stand and talk to them through the door, and they set up cameras outside of the e-fry office and everything to watch you coming. Like,
That's not access to justice.
No.
But it's like we do, but like in this conversation, like advocating against the city, like the legal side of all this is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Like we need a lawyer that believes in what we believe in to fight the fight where it matters, right? And like, so who's gonna do that? Right? Is it something that we fundraise for and get a real lawyer? Are we gonna ask someone to do it pro bono? Who do we know? There's like.
Does anyone have a lawyer on the board?
Today, this is who I'm thinking of. I only know her from Twitter. Naomi something Quay Today is her handle at Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
She's a former sex worker who became a lawyer, and I mean, she's not from Peterborough, but
This lawyer could also help with encampment evictions.
yeah. If she has capacity.
There are
like-
lawyers.
Anyway.
Yeah.
What did Will say? What did Will say? What did you say, Will?
A lawyer could also help with encampment evictions. We have a lawyer on our board.
We tried to find one, but we couldn't find one.
Reaching out. Poor Lorraine. Yes, all right, your hand.
Housing Resource Center, we don't have a lawyer, but going into kind of tenant rights and community justice and kind of non-lawyer legal support is an area that we're interested in pushing it, and we're hosting paralegal placement students right now.
Yay.
So in terms of getting some research done on some possibilities, I think we get there.
Yes, I love this process. Cool. Sorry, I just was really wondering if anyone was going to raise their hand, and you all raised your hands. We're going to wrap. Marianne's going to do thank you. Then we're going to do a traveling song. This has been amazing, and it's only the beginning of what is clearly going to be a lot of hard work. So rest well this weekend.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Research for Social Change Lab podcast. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to follow us on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on the Research for Social Change Lab's activities, including past, present, and future projects, visit socialchangelab.ca.